welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Abbasi. I'm a grateful, recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. I am still just punching my way through this flu. We're on week 2. We are formally on week 2 of the flu. I do feel better than I did a couple days ago, so I'm moving in the right direction. My husband has been dealing with it too. And he did say yesterday that yesterday was the first day that he actually did not feel better. So hopefully his is not going in the wrong direction. Um, for me, what I've noticed is, especially after recording yesterday's podcast, that it takes a lot of energy for me to do this. So I'm going to try to slow down and make sure that I can breathe through it. Most of my symptoms now are in my sinuses and my lungs. So I don't think there's anything down there in my lungs, but it takes a lot of effort for me to like breathe and talk. So we're gonna do it anyway because I don't know. I miss it. I've been off for like a week, so I want to make sure that even though it might be short, that I want to do my little made up job, my podcast. So today the topic is about um spiritual fitness and emotional sobriety. The story this morning in my morning meeting was talking about um, those brewing like agitations when other people are not exactly meeting our expectations, the expectations that even though they might be kind of unreasonable, what that does within us when we build these expectations and other people don't meet them, and how that can lead to resentments and really become much bigger than it started. So the morning reading was out of the book Emotional Sobriety. And it was about a man who, like, him and his wife would get up early in the morning and she would get up before him. And he was really agitated by the fact that she did not make coffee for them in the morning, that the coffee wasn't made until he got up. And so it's I think it's almost humorous, even though it's not supposed to be, that we will latch on to the smallest thing that somebody else in our lives either does or doesn't do. And it becomes this frustration that it just kind of balloons up. He like just kept getting more and more agitated that he always had to be the one to wake up and make the coffee. And really, what was happening was his own spiritual sickness. Like, that resentment that was building because his wife was not acting according to his, expectations, was more about something that he was needing on the inside. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about him building an expectation of his wife that honestly she had no freaking clue that he was building this expectation and resentment about. Like later on, after he started to recognize how this is associated to defects of character and recognizing them and working the steps in order to counteract that. Um, Once he was able to do that, he and his wife later talked about his expectations of her making the coffee. And she doesn't even remember that that was a thing, because it was all within him. That spiritual sickness, that resentment, that agitation about somebody else's behavior is only living inside your head. It's only living between his ears. There was one time when my mom and I, hi mom, if you're listening, I love you. My mom and I had picked her up from a flight at Dulles Airport, and we were driving, like I had picked her up in arrivals, and arrivals and departures can end up being very chaotic at times at Dulles Airport. I'm trying to breathe, side note, I'm trying to breathe through my symptoms and my fatigue. So I hope it's not very distracting to listen to this, but whatever. So I had picked up my mom, and then we were waiting for another individual to put his suitcase and stuff inside his car in order to move. And um I don't know. I somehow the guy got really pissed off at us, at our car. We weren't even doing anything. We were just sitting there waiting for him to get out of the way. And anyway, he got really upset with us and actually kind of gestured or yelled at us or something like that. And once the interaction was over and they pulled away and we were pulling away, um, my mom said something like, how irritating that was, how pissed off that guy made us feel. And what I said to her was, um, if we continue to think about or let that bother us, then he wins. What he was trying to do to us, he is successful at it. So it's what we need to do is figure out how to let it go. And for some reason, that was really a significant realization for me, how that guy who was expressing his unhappiness towards us, how he went on with his life and left us with the remnants of what he dumped on us. And it's just that is the stuff that can get stuck between my ears. And that is, I feel like one of my character defects is holding on to that stuff. Um, Recognizing that I'm agitated. I mean, it's sure it's easy to be like, that dude pissed me off, but to actively work at changing what it's doing inside of me, um, changing the idea that that guy didn't act as I would expect somebody to act. He didn't treat me the way that I deserve to be treated. He didn't do things my way. However you want to spin it, um, those defects of character within me, because that's what it is. After he drives away, what I'm left with are my own defects of character that create my own emotional tension. And that's when I need to stop, notice my negative pattern, and figure out how can I start practicing new ways to not hold on and create emotional tension. What are some habitual patterns of mine that fuel frustration where I can cease it? I can stop practicing those defects and start building space for better responses. And that's really, to me, what what is required. It's like I have to carve out a space for me to build a peaceful response. I have to carve out space within that tension and insert peace where I can stop that habit of feeding agitation and resentment and start a catalyst for new behavior. You know, what is the connection between the emotional tension that is building and my spiritual fitness? Um, if I'm not used to praying, if I'm not used to using my God box and letting go of things, that's when I start digging that hole of agitation and resentment. But if I'm really close to, meaning I constantly and actively practice letting go, praying, working the steps of my program, it's easier for me to pause. It's easier for me to practice things like halt. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Because when I can identify, oh, I'm angry that my wife isn't making the coffee, I can recognize that maybe that's just not a reasonable expectation of mine. Have I ever even communicated to her that I expect her to make the coffee? Or am I thinking she's supposed to read my mind and make my coffee? Um, Am I even contributing? Maybe it makes more sense. If I'm the one that wants the coffee so bad, maybe I should be making the coffee, you know? I mean, it's just a small example of those internal experiences that we have that shape how I interact with reality. Like, what's happening on the inside of me is often more important than what's actually going on externally. And when I can start managing that internal agitation, that restlessness, and stay close to the program, um, like I said, when something feels not right in me, explore what might be going on. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Do I have unreasonable expectations? Um, what can I do to just pause and start scraping out some of that agitation to make space for dealing with my externals, my dealing with what's going on internally, so that I can not lash out and have a resentment that I'm going to later have to apologize for. You know, learning how to focus on what needs to be changed within me is is going to naturally affect my responses to what's going on outside of me. And that's where the growth is. The growth starts within me. Um, I have to truly understand what is sparking this stuff in order to learn new ways of living, you know? Um, and then when I do things like come to meetings and I get to hear things like how much simply a I can't think of the word, a for lack of a better word, the habit of waking up in the morning with your wife and building this agitation that only you are aware of. I can go to a meeting and hear somebody talking about agitations. Like there were lots of folks this morning that talked about these simple things that get stuck in your craw and start making you agitated. And when you start talking about it with other people, you kind of realize how silly it is. So discussing these little agitations and stuff are the beginning of carving out that space and creating a spiritual practice, really, that can help work through difficult, difficult emotions and thoughts. But if I don't practice that on a daily basis, if I don't, it's kind of like if I don't stay here's kind of an analogy. So in my recovery, my stroke recovery, I don't go too far away from home. When I'm walking the dogs, I tend to circle my house. And if I'm on a good day, I'll circle a little wider from my house. But I always am making it easier for me to come back home if I don't feel good, if I don't feel right. That's how I need to practice my program. That's how I need to relate to my higher power as well. I need to make sure that I'm never going too far away, that it's easy for me to check back in. And when I do that on a regular basis, I'm checking back in on a regular basis, I'm praying on a regular basis, meditating, doing things like calling my sponsor, going to meetings, or for those of you in vestibular and or stroke recovery, not getting too far away from your support groups and your fellowships so that when you're not feeling quite right, it's easier to access that. And the more repetitive and the more yeah, that becomes a habit to check back in, the easier it is to do it when things are difficult. When I start feeling agitated, when I start physically not feeling well and I need to come home on a walk, it's the same as when I start emotionally not feeling well and I have to check back in with my higher power or my support groups or my meetings and it gets easier to stop harmful patterns, you know? So I'm encouraging you today to approach your own frustrations with self-compassion, openness to change, and remember to not stray too far. You know, when you feel yourself starting to distance yourself from your higher power or distance yourself from your program, whatever program of recovery you might be involved in. Remember to check back in. And that's where I believe my spiritual connection is. That's what makes life easier for me when I stay closer to home. Yeah. So thank you for listening today. I'm trying. I'm trying. We'll keep getting through it until it gets easier. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.